Hey everybody, Brendan here. Welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be covering another tournament game. And this was the Mississauga Summer under 2100 section. And yeah, well, it was played during the summer. And this is round one. I'm playing with the white pieces against Eric Q in this game. So let's see how it goes. D4. Which again I've been playing just a teensy bit, I believe. I don't think this is my first game I've played with it, but it's definitely something I'm new to and not good at yet, to say the least. D4, D5, C4, the Queen's Gambit, E6, Knight to C3, Knight F6, now Knight to F3, Bishop E7, Bishop G5, H6. I took E3. Castles and Bishop E2. Just normal development here. And my idea is I'm just going to castle. Maybe I'll eventually take on D5 here. Maybe I won't. And I'll just see how things play out. My opponent ends up playing B6, which I was happy to see. Because generally when your opponent plays B6, you should take on D5. And that's exactly what I did here. And the point is, after e takes d5, well, they played b6 because they wanted to develop on the long diagonal, but after taking on d5, it doesn't make as much sense because, well, they don't have a way to remove their d5 pawn. Yeah, so that's basically the big idea there. I castled. Bishop to e6 now. Rook to c1, and now my whole goal is to take advantage of the c-pawn, which will eventually become a potential weakness. Either it moves to c6 or maybe pushes to c5, but generally it's not going to be easy to defend, and by that I mean just defend it with a pawn, and it's on a semi-open file, so that's something I'm kind of happy about. We see queen e7, queen to d2, rook to d8, and now I play the move b4. So this is just a little trap. The real question is, okay, first, what happens if you take it, and what happens if you don't? My opponent did not take it. They played c6. But if you take it, this is actually a huge mistake, because now knight takes d5 just kind of just wins, honestly. There's not really any other way to put it, because after queen takes d2, knight takes f6, pawn takes, and knight takes d2, it doesn't even matter that c2 is hanging, because of course c7 is hanging in return. But the big problem is it's pretty much equal material. Actually, it is equal material. The only imbalance in the position. Well, actually, wait. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, just double checking. It is equal material, yeah. But the only imbalance in the position, because we both have the same minor pieces and same amount of rooks, is that their structure is worse than mine, and this just kind of makes it two-side result. White is practically winning every game here. So anyways, yeah, my opponent played c6 because, well, they wanted to defend the pawn. This still can't be taken, so I could just play around it. I ended up playing knight a4, and this was aimed towards trying to prevent this knight from developing here, because if the knight doesn't develop, or if the knight does develop, then c6 will hang. So that's kind of a big idea. Also, it's trying to prevent c5 a little bit more as well. Queen e8 was played, and this is a tricky way to try to get in c5, because now the knight would be hanging. I played queen c2, just covering my knight. Bishop to d7, reintroducing the threat. I played knight c3, they played bishop e6, knight a4, bishop back to d7, and this time I decided to change plans and go knight to b2, seeing if they'd repeat. They end up not repeating here though. They go a5, I went a3, bishop to e7 now, trying to target the pawn, and I just defend it with queen b3. So nothing really impressive or crazy has happened yet. I'd say the only imbalance is, again, they have a weak c6 pawn, but they do have the bishop pair in return. So that is a plus, at least for them. A takes b4, A takes b4, and then now they played b5, which was pretty shocking to me. Generally, this is a very counterintuitive move. But surprisingly makes quite a bit of sense here. The idea behind b5 is that, well, b4 is weak enough, and not only is b4 weak enough, but they can just try to cover up the c-file by getting the knight to c4. And even if they don't, well, their weakness is covered enough in the meantime. So it's not actually as big of a deal as one would wish it would be. So realizing that, yeah, I'm not really going to get anywhere on this C file, I end up playing rook a1, trying to take over the a file, the only open file on the board. I was also thinking maybe of something like knight e5. I just didn't see too much the point. For example, bishop d6, what would I do here? My idea was knight e3, but this isn't actually that great, surprisingly, going for the c5 square, because they can always defend it with a move like knight c5, and am I really going to want to put a knight there, yes or no? It's not so clear. But funnily enough, yeah, I should just like leave the knight on e5 and just play a normal move like queen c3, which is really kind of weird to me and counterintuitive. But if they give up the bishop, give back the bishop pair, then we're actually quite happy about that. That's the idea there. Yeah, so rook a1 instead. And around this time, I was remembering I had a game in d4 where I had a similar situation where it was a kind of similar structure where I clearly had the better structure. At least in that game, I definitely had the better structure. This game, I thought it was kind of similar. Turns out the eval is a little bit less favorable towards me for these instances in this game, but generally it looks pretty similar to a game that I played where I had an edge and I completely lost it. And I think that psychologically started getting to me here, where I was just thinking, oh no, I'm in another one of these circumstances and I'm probably just gonna like find a way to mess it up. And I think just like psychologically thinking like that did not help, and things start going wrong. So knight a6, knight to d3, bishop to f5, and I'm kind of forced now to play knight c5, which is not really fun, because b4 is hanging and there's not really any other way to deal with it. Like, there's ideas of knight e5, but the problem is f6 comes at the very least, and that's a problem because the rook's no longer on the c file, so I can't take on c6 as in return. So I end up playing knight c5, and after knight takes c5, this is actually all fine. I made the wrong recapture. So white to move, and how should you recapture in this position? The fact that I'm asking the question probably gives away the answer, but it's not something someone would expect. So d takes c5 is wrong. It looks more natural because if we play the move b takes c5, one thing that we immediately might notice is they have a protected passed pawn on b5, and that's no fun. But there are other reasons why taking on c5 with the b pawn are better. The first thing is now there's no weak b pawn. Whereas if we take like this, there's always potential that this could start getting pounced on. And also, if we take with the b pawn, we're taking towards the center, so that is one thing. It feels kind of useless information for a position like this, but maybe it's actually not such a bad thing. And a variation could go g6, bishop d3, trading. And this is like my nightmare scenario, getting a position like this, where it's just like a queen ending with like minor piece differences, because I thought the pawn might just run, but it turns out it's not actually an issue. So if they try to get the pawn running, they're just not in time, like with any queen b8 stuff. Because we can always block on b4, or we can always reroute the knight to b4 just in time. So like queen b8 or something here. They don't really want to push too early, because if they start pushing, now it's a problem because knight d3 and the pawn is actually just lost. So that would be a huge mistake. And yeah, it turns out the pawn actually isn't able to make any progress, which means lucky us, and we're okay. But I took with the d pawn The biggest issue is, of course, that it does open the long diagonal, which isn't so great. So they played bishop f6, rook takes, and now they do have the open file, at least for the meantime. I played bishop d3, hoping to maybe put the knight on d4 and maybe liquidate things, and hopefully things would turn out okay. They end up actually trading. Queen takes d3 and rook a4. So I go rook b1 to defend the only weakness here. It didn't make sense to move my queen, because if I moved my queen, let's just say rook a4, then I move my queen, there's always moves like queen e4 in the position, and then I have to go fully passive. Whereas at least with my queen on d3, if I go rook b1, if they want to go queen e4 and offer the trade of queens, I'm a little bit happier here. The idea is something like this, where I can go maybe knight d4. This feels at least a little bit different, because now they're kind of forced to take, and if they try to go for counterplay, maybe I get some sacrifices, and for example like d5 looks quite interesting here. So yeah, queen a8 was played instead, because queen e4, it might be fine, but like optically it doesn't look so great. Knight to d4, threatening the c6 pawn in some scenarios here. Rook a1 naturally, and I play g3 because, well, either I take on a1 and just like lose, or I don't take on a1 and instead I play it like this, where I play g3. First off, g3 instead of h3, because I thought I would want to control some dark squares with this dark square bishop. That was one idea. I keep saying I gotta stop that. I'm sorry. So g3 again, light squares. I'm trying to control more dark squares since they have a dark square bishop, and also maybe I can maneuver my knight onto dark squares where it controls light squares. Right now it's controlling c6. Again, it was just more so, again, I needed Luft. That was a big idea here. And then they took on d4. So this was kind of surprising, but also not, because if they don't take on d4, c6 could always be a weakness. E takes d4, queen a3, and I was fine here as long as I played the correct move. And I was thinking of this move in the game, but I just didn't play it for some reason because I didn't see a difference. So what I had calculated here was queen f5, rook takes b1, takes, queen c3, queen f5, queen takes b4 or d4. Let's just say queen takes b4 to get the outside passer. Queen c8 check, king h7, and then queen takes c6. And if they try going for the d4 pawn, I just take the b5 pawn. So it doesn't really matter. And if they go queen c4 trying to push the pawn, well, I can also go queen b7 to start pushing my pawn. So there's not really any chances here. It looks relatively equal, and I have enough counter play, of course. So instead I played queen c2 because I thought both were the same, but they're not. Because now there's queen a2. And we get into a rook ending, not a queen ending. And this one is a little bit less pleasant to play. Objectively, I think it's still okay, but it's not something I should have gone for. Queen f5 was better. Queen a2 is very sloppy and a very stupid move, and I'm very upset about that. But what can you do? So I traded rook takes a2, king g2, rook d2, rook a1, and I'm trying to go for active counterplay, as you should in these types of rook endings, where if I stay passive, well, then they just win a pawn and then bring their king in, and then they just win the game. So I have to go for active counterplay. Rook takes d8, rook a6. I maybe could have thrown in rook a6 check first. I didn't see a point. Rook takes b4, rook takes c6, king f8, rook d6, d4, and so this position should be relatively not easy to hold, but it's holdable. It's a rook ending where, sure, we're down a pawn, but things are very likely to liquidate into like a 3 versus 3 or a 3 versus 2. And that's what I should have allowed. There's actually a variation here. King f3, rook c4, rook d5, just to defend the pawn. King e7, king e4, rook c2, getting the active counterplay against the second rank here. King d3, surprising move, but the whole point is we play c6, b4, c7, and they eventually can make it back to stop the pawn in time. Rook b5, rook takes, rook c2, h4, and move like rook e2. And yeah, this is a 3 versus 2. Computer says it's a draw. It should be a draw. Of course, there's some work to do for both sides. Black is going to try to push this anyways, and white's going to try to hold it, but should be holdable. Instead, because I have 4 brain cells, I played rook b6. Absolutely useless move. Moving the king in, why would I do that when I can just waste a move, rook b6? I thought they were going to play d3 for some reason, and then I maybe go rook d6. But why would I do this anyways? They can probably just go like rook b3. I think the idea here was some sort of like c6, rook c3, c7. But even here, this still looks very, very depressing to play because they get their rook behind their pawn, and this just does not feel fun. So 4 brain cell type of move, and of course they soon win. So d3, king f3, and I missed the simple rook d4. So after rook d4, I just resigned because there's nothing to do here. Like rook d6, I wish worked, but of course this doesn't work at all. They can push or they don't have to. I'd say push is fine. But king e8, king e3, king d7, king takes. And we can clearly tell that black's going to win this. If one doesn't know how to win these types of king and pawn endings, they're not 1800, but also it's just important for those that aren't 1800 that want to get better. The reason why this is winning is that, well, the pawn is just going to be a distraction. You can't really win with just the pawn alone. So if you get rid of these pawns altogether, it's a draw. But because of the pawns on the other side of the board, this is winning because our king is going to have to babysit this pawn. Their king can start running over and just taking stuff. And since they can take stuff, they'll be up more than just one pawn at the end of the day. They'll end up being a bunch of pawns up. So, for example, king c3 to stop the pawn, king e5, king b4, king e4 takes, king f3, king c6. We're just way too slow here, as we can see. Even if we play h4 something, but position like this, I'd say g5 is important to throw in. Why not? King g6, king takes g3, king takes, and now g4, and we can see, yeah, this is winning. Bam, 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 bam. There we go. And that's the win. So obviously you don't really have to calculate that with rook d6. You can kind of just tell that that would be losing, and king e3 unfortunately does not work because d2, and they promote, and this would be losing too. So that's of course why I resigned after rook to d4, and that was a pretty sad start to this tournament. I felt like I was playing somewhat okay, and then I just messed up the structure. Queen c2 was unnecessary. Rook b6 was very, very stupid. But that's how the game went, and that's about it. So again, improvements are just make sure I'm spending more time. I think I was kind of speedy in this game for absolutely no reason as well. So that's something that I learned to work on after this tournament and the next one. I think I needed a few tournaments to really reinforce this behavior of not rushing my moves, because there were a lot of decisions I made that I didn't really need to make. And one thing that I really needed to work on was these types of structures where it feels like white should have an edge, but it's hard to prove, and I need to have more realistic understanding of how to evaluate these positions and not just say that, oh yay, c6 pawn is weak, I'm better or something, because here it's not as clear. So that's kind of a big lesson learned there. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in round 2 for the Mississauga Summer under 2100 section. Have a good one. Bye-bye.